Welcome to This Week in Plymouth. I'm Julie Thompson. I'm hosting today, and of course we have Derek Brindisi, who's the Plymouth Town Manager. Welcome.
Thank you, Julie.
Okay, so we have a lot to talk about. Let's talk about kind of current affairs, things that are going on in the town of Plymouth.
Sure.
Can I start with the Sims or the Symes house? I'm not sure if people pronounce it different ways. There's a couple things going on with that. Can you give a little background on what is happening with the Symes house and who's responsible for it?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Actually, that's timely. As you may recall, about 4 weeks ago now, the Select Board appointed a seven-member community task force, and the primary mission is to determine the future use of the Sims house. And so they've been meeting weekly over at the Sims house at 4 p.m. We're going to have a meeting tomorrow, which is actually going to be virtual. But they've been meeting weekly, trying to get a better sense of, what is the future use of the building. So the first meeting, we did a tour of the building. We went in every room. We looked at the conditions of the building, just to get a sense, like, what are the possibilities? What could be some of the ideas? So they've been working through that process. They've identified a couple next steps. So one step is to hire an engineering firm to come in to look at the existing condition of the building, which is in good condition.
Right.
There are some things that have to be repaired. There has been some water damage. We know the outside of the building has to be painted.
Yep.
We know that the windows have to be reglazed. So we'll hire a firm to come in to identify all the weaknesses and then put a cost associated with making those repairs.
Okay.
So that's step one.
Yep.
Selectman Helm, he had at one of our previous meetings, he had asked that we do this retrospective study of the construction. So we're going back to 2015 to 2017 to look at the construction at the time, the costs associated with the construction at the time, to determine whether or not we received the services that we paid for.
Right, because there was quite a big construction project on that house around that time where there was a lot of money that put into it, a lot of plans that were made. Did they not develop the way that you all thought they would?
Well, so there were two phases in that original reconstruction of that, rehabilitation, I should say. So there was $1 million or thereabouts appropriated to CPC to go ahead, I believe it was to put a roof on, paint the exterior, so all exterior work. And then about a year later, there was approximately $2.8 million appropriated to then rehabilitate the inside of the building. And so during the course of like any construction project, sometimes you don't have enough money to do everything that you thought. So I remember because I was a part of that group, the project management group, we had to take out the kitchen at the time to reduce costs. And there were a few other cost reducing measures that didn't put the building in the position as far as generating revenue as they originally had intended.
And that was the idea, right? This building was going to be for town groups, organizations to be able to meet there and to rent it out or to create revenue for the town.
Well, yeah. So the whole goal was that this building was going to be self-sustainable.
Right.
And so it wasn't going to be managed or operated by the town. At the time, it was going to be managed and operated by a nonprofit. The town released a bid right after the construction had been complete, and they awarded it to a local nonprofit organization who had a business plan in order to manage and maintain the building for years to come.
Okay.
That ceased back in June.
Okay, and do we know, can we say why did that cease?
So it was a 5-year lease agreement.
Okay.
And so the lease expired on June 16th, I believe it was, or June 17th. The board had a conversation. A number of board members actually went to visit the building prior to taking a formal vote. And I think the majority of the board felt that the town should take it back and then go through the process it's going through right now, appoint a committee, and then try to, again, identify the future use of the building.
And there's a survey that the town has sent out about the use of this house. And there's been some question on the viability of the survey or what the survey is asking. What is the purpose of this? Is this strictly to get input from residents on what they want to see the use of this house?
So it's the primary purpose of this survey is focus on potential municipal use.
Okay.
But before I talk about the survey itself, I think it's really important for folks to understand that the committee is looking at 3 different courses of action. Because at the end of the analysis, they have to come back to the board and make some recommendations.
Yep.
And so they have, they have to make sure every stone has been turned. And so one of the analyses is what this survey is geared towards, focusing on municipal use.
Yep.
There's a parallel track that's taking place to look at and to determine whether or not this building could be rented out to maybe a nonprofit organization or maybe a for-profit business. So that's another track that the committee is also searching. And then if both of those come up empty, the third option would be to sell the building.
Right.
Right. And so the committee has talked a little bit about that and what that would look like. But right now they're focused on trying to determine whether or not there is a viable option for municipal use or a viable option to lease the building to a potential business.
Okay.
So this survey is focused, if the folks that want to take the survey, we're primarily trying to understand whether or not the 9 precincts that are in that minimum area would want to use this building for a satellite town hall or another type of municipal use.
Okay.
So the survey's online. You can go on the town's website and you can click on the survey link and it asks you a bunch of questions.
Yep.
If you're an individual who, say, lives in precinct 1 or 2 or 3, that's kind of the northern part that's near Town Hall on Court Street. We know the answer to that question. Would you ever use the Sims house for municipal use? The answer is no.
No, of course not.
Right? So if that person were to answer no, then you would just submit your survey.
Yep.
If you're from a precinct like down in the Manamet area, you would then be able to answer questions. Okay, you want it for municipal use. What type of services would you like to see?
Okay.
And so we have a bunch of questions like for town clerks, right? So the town clerk's office, we talked last week with Kelly McElrath. They issue birth certificates, death certificates, dog licenses.
Yeah, they do a lot.
Yeah, so we're asking a lot of questions like that. What would
Yep.
people want to see?
Okay.
Paying your taxes, for
Okay.
example, getting a beach sticker, those types of questions.
So you'll know more when the survey is completed and when this working group brings some suggestions to the select board.
Yeah, so we believe from this survey we'll get a sense of whether or not those 9 precincts would find value in the Sims house being a satellite town hall.
Okay.
And say the answer is yes. Well, we also, as we focus on a potential business use, we may find half a dozen businesses that also want to use the Sims house for whatever, maybe a CPA or an attorney or something like that would want to use it. So that's great because now we have 2 viable options we can present to the select.
Sure. Okay, perfect. So more to follow on that. Now, the second thing I'd love to talk about that's been kind of coming up in the last few days is the ATV usage at the Woodlot. Now, evidently, the New England Outbackers Facebook page announced that they came to an agreement with Boston South, who has leased that land, to create an area where people can go ride their ATVs. So there's a lot of probably misinformation out there. Can you, from what you know, the select board and the town manager has not made, you're not part of this process at all, correct?
Not at all.
Okay.
No. So I can tell you a couple of things that I know that are happening.
Okay.
But before I go down and tell you a story, I want the folks to understand that the select board, they have no part in the development or the potential uses of the Woodlot. The select board has 100% of the say on what we're going to do with the Sims house, right?
Yeah.
But not the Woodlot,
Yeah.
right? So the Woodlot is county lands controlled by the county. There's a 3-year lease agreement with the county commissioners and Boston South.
Okay.
That's what we do now. It has nothing to do with the town of Plymouth.
Except that the town of Plymouth, the select board has made it clear that they do not want the initial horse track.
Right.
That was the initial proposal. They made that clear that they are against that.
Right.
Okay.
They're against it.
And that's really as far as they can go. Is they
At
can
this-
say
they can say we're
Okay.
against it.
And they have done that.
And they have done that.
Okay.
Right now, from what we understand, the regulations say that any type of horse racing in a community needs the local executive body's approval,
Which is the select board.
which is the select board.
Okay.
And they've already said,
No.
based upon the non-binding referendum, 88% to 12% have said no horse racing.
Right.
So the board is trying to deliver on that vote.
Okay. But now this is something totally new, this ATV.
Right. So
All-terrain vehicles, for anyone who doesn't know.
So I can say that there are, as of last week, there's been a number of individuals who have toured the woodlot.
Yep.
The Boston South officials have offered, say, listen, if you want to see the property, I'm more than happy to take you out, show you around, let you know some of the things that we're thinking.
Okay.
I took advantage of that because I wanted to see the woodlot myself.
Okay.
I want to get a better sense. When people ask me questions, I can answer the questions like you're asking me.
Right, right.
So for me, it was beneficial. And so I had the opportunity to spend an hour on the property, look at different areas of the property, and then during the tour, just have conversations with Boston South officials. And they talked about all types of possibilities, everything from horse racing to ATV, to a potential ATV track, to potential biotechnology, entertainment complex. I mean, from what I understand by talking to Boston South officials, right now for them everything is on the table.
Okay.
And they're going through their process to decide, what potential uses this property could be used for.
Yep.
Which again, I'm going to say it again, it's no different than the process the committee's going through for the Sims house.
Right.
Exploring all these potential uses.
Yep.
And so, again, one of the items that came up during the conversation was, well, potentially we could use this or a portion of it for ATVs, off-roading, that type of stuff. I can tell you right now, if you go on that property, it's already being used by dirt bikes and other ATVs for off-roading. It's just not done legally.
Okay.
And then apparently last week on social media, like you just pointed out, there was a group that announced that there's been some agreement made with Boston South to have a legal ATV trail there.
Right.
And that's all we know.
Okay. And let's just, again, make it really clear that the town really can't do anything about what Boston South is going to use that land for right now. Because they lease it. The town doesn't own it.
Right.
It's owned by the county, and the county has leased it to Boston South. So if Boston South suggests something that has to go through a committee approval or a board approval, then that will have to happen.
Right.
But, so I guess the question is, does an ATV track have to go through any of our zoning, is there anything that the town of Plymouth has to get involved with? Because someone did bring up the point of insurance. What if people get injured or hurt? It's the county's issue, right? It's not the town's issue.
Yeah, I mean, the town, we don't take on any liability for private developers.
Okay.
So this would be no different than a private developer wanting to build it.
Okay.
This just happens to be on county land, which is public land, but again, there's no liability against the town for that.
Okay.
I can tell you that all of the different items that are on the table that I just discussed, Boston South believes that these are all by right. Like, it's already within the town's table of uses to do some of this work.
Okay.
But let me pause for a second because, a lot of folks are out there, well, what does council say?
Right, sure.
We don't really care what they say. What do our attorneys say? And so our selectmen, a couple weeks ago, they submitted to town council a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
And some of those questions were, what legal authority does the town have through its boards and committees to regulate this property? What legal authority do county commissioners, or are they exempt from having to go through the town in order to seek permits? So to your question, I can't answer that with 100% fact until I get the responses back from town council.
Okay.
But we do believe that the boards and committees do have authority in regulating and the permitting of whatever happens on the property. And the reason why we believe that is because the town in years past has issued a permit for a gravel removal.
Yep.
So there's already a ZBA permit that's out there that gave permission to a company to remove gravel. So based upon that ruling, we would believe that we've already set a precedent and that anything that comes to the county woodlot would require some type of approval by town boards and committees. Okay. But again, that's yet to be determined.
Right. So we have to wait.
The attorneys will fight that out.
Right. So we have to wait until the attorneys come back with telling you what they have found to be factual.
Right.
And then we'll go from there.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And so again, just to reiterate, there was some scuttlebutt on social media about these dirt bikes and this dirt bike track. Again, nothing to do with the town.
Yeah.
We have no conversation. The town is having no conversations with Boston South or the county on their development.
Okay. End of story for now. Okay. Now, at your last select board meeting, you presented, or the select board presented, the Town of Plymouth Select Board FY23 goals and priorities, which it was really quite a nice document. It included a lot of things. It had different sections about a safe and healthy community, long-term financial planning, engaging with the public, strong and vibrant economic development, improving town infrastructure and protecting the environment, and strengthening the town's workforce, creating efficient town government, and for future generations, which is 4 to 6 years out. So are there any sections on this you'd really like to hone in on that there's either misunderstandings about or that you consider really, really priorities for people to understand
Sure.
that the town is working on these things?
Yeah, so if I could spend a few minutes just kind of talking about process.
Sure,
right?
please do.
So last Tuesday, the chairman of the board, Betty Cavaco, presented on behalf of the board to the community these sets of goals and priorities.
Yep.
And during that discussion, she laid out the process. And so what we did in order to try to coalesce all these ideas and strategies, what we did on my side is I met with the department heads. We held one session, couple-hour session, where I asked all the different department heads to bring to me their ideas,
Okay.
their thoughts, the
Yep.
things that they know that we need to do to advance the community. And then the board, on their own, they held 2 workshops where they had a similar conversation. They talked about and they debated what they think we need to do to advance some of our priorities.
Okay.
And then what we did is we took the department's ideas, the board's ideas, and we moved them all into one document.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because when you lay them all out, what we tried to do is identify themes. I call them buckets,
Yep,
right?
yep.
And so and that's how we organize them in this document, like you just mentioned, ensure a safe and healthy community.
Yep, that's one bucket.
That's one bucket,
Yep.
and a lot of fire and public health and
Yep.
and police items are in there,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
So after we organized them, what I then just did is I met with our department heads. So for the first year, at least I think probably in the last 20 years, maybe 15 years, each one of our department heads, they have an annual work plan.
Okay.
And so our department heads will be measured in June based upon the goals and objectives that they have set for their own departments.
Oh, great.
You know,
Okay.
so
Yep.
and so those are the checks and balances. So we're going to check ourselves in this document,
Yep.
but then each individual department will have their annual check in June, and then the department heads will be rated against what they have committed to me that are realistic and achievable goals for
Yep.
that year.
Yep.
And so the reason why I'm telling you that part is because they all align, right? So
Yeah.
the annual work plan departments align here, the goals of the board members align here, and so my hope is by June, we'll be able to check off, I'm hoping at least 90% of the things that we said we were going to do
Yeah.
are going to be
Or at least started.
completed.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm thinking a lot of them are going to be completed, but yeah, we'll have some of them started that may take another additional 1 or 2 years. Like
Sure, because
for-
some things dovetail on each other, right? You need one department to support the other department to create something.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah, right. And that's the other thing too is, we don't want the departments to work in silos.
As islands,
they have,
right,
They
right.
have to work together.
Sure.
On a lot of these
Sure.
things. So that was the process, and then again it culminated into last week's board meeting where we presented it back to the community.
Yep. So why don't you go over a few things that you think it's important for people to realize that you're really working hard on?
Sure. Well, so I guess I'll try to work my way through some of these themes, but just so folks are aware, when you look at ensure a safe and healthy community, there's a lot of items on this list that you may have heard in the past. So we've heard about the fire department conducting their study, right? That study is going to focus on where they are today and where they need to be in 20 years from
Yep.
now. So we're working through that process.
Okay.
We have already engaged the sheriff's department, both the fire, police department, and the IT department. So as you just pointed out, multiple departments working together
Sure.
on one project is to develop a 21st century 911 dispatch center.
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
that one's going to take
Yep.
some time.
Sure
So that's
it will,
probably
right.
one we won't say on June 30th, check done.
No.
It's going to take some time,
Yeah.
but we know that
Yep.
we have to move in that direction.
Yep.
One of them that I really like a lot because I know it's a need in this community.
Yep.
It's certainly a need in a lot of other communities. Is developing a full-day summer camp.
Yep.
It's paramount. You know, parents on June 21st when school ends,
Yeah, they're in
they look
trouble.
at their kid. What do they do?
Yeah, they're in
and
trouble.
So we have half-day
Yep.
summer camp, which is great, but that's still a burden on parents.
That's
So Hedges Pond, we're looking at that area.
Yep.
That's probably a multi-year project
Yep.
to get there.
Yep.
You know, we have to ready that site for a full day and then get the staffing. So
Great.
that's another great. That's one that I'm really excited about as well.
Okay. We only have like 8 minutes left in our
It's going by
28.
quick.
It's going by quick. So do you want to take? I know you could literally spend 5 or 10 minutes on each one of these bullet points without a doubt.
Yeah.
Is on the overall subject matter, like the commit to long-term financial planning. Now that clearly has a lot to do with what are we going to take in for money, what are we going to spend on taxes, what are we going to do for capital improvement. So can we talk about that one, because that's a biggie?
Yeah. So I mean, at the end of the day, all of our conversations end with our finances.
Right.
And so there's a couple of things. The finance department a couple years back, they developed this financial forecasting tool
Yep.
that's saying, okay, if these are our revenues today, and these are projected expenditures, where are we going to, based upon that growth, where are we going to be in 10 years
Yep.
from now? So we're going to update that so we can get more finite information so we can make really good financial decisions. But one of the items that came to me when I first got here was around capital improvement.
Yeah.
Big community,
Yeah.
big budget, and quite frankly, the budget can't support all of our capital needs. So we right now our capital improvement plan is only 5 years. We want to extend that to 10 years. So again, having more of this long-range planning view is kind of what the focus of a lot of our
Right.
goals these days.
Way to go. Okay. Communicate and engage with the public. You want to develop a 311 system, which is going to be a way for, if I understand it right, for residents to be able to lodge a complaint or ask for assistance in something in a really efficient way without trying to find out who do I email, who do I go to. There'll be one place to
Right.
send their information.
Yeah, so this is probably going to be the one that if we're able to get off the ground, the one I'm going to be most excited about because, I can tell you that I get lots of calls, emails, and assistant town manager does, departments do. So there's really not one central location for our residents to say, hey, listen,
Yeah.
I got a pothole,
Yep.
or my street's not plowed,
Yep.
or my curbing's broken. And honestly, like the vast majority of the calls we get are really public works related.
Yeah.
I mean, just because of the infrastructure
Sure,
alone, right?
of course.
So this program is going to allow folks to go online and to enter their call,
Yep.
Identify what the problem is, and then they can track it themselves. So it'll get routed to the appropriate department, and then they can
perfect.
say, hey, listen, I filed a complaint 2 days ago for a pothole,
Yeah.
and it'll say when it's going to get repaired.
That's great.
And then it'll say when it is repaired. So there's definitely an accountability piece. So especially on my end, if I get that call,
Sure.
I can go into the system and say, geez, how come it took us 3 weeks to fill a pothole? That's
Exactly.
a problem.
Yep.
Right? So the 311 system, it's been used very successfully in a lot of other communities.
Yep, excellent. Economic development, that's another big, huge factor. And we're going to, this whole presentation is available on your website.
That's right.
We're also going to show it on this show here. We'll give just the overview of it. So we don't have time to go through all of them, but let's just end on that one. Ensure a strong and vibrant economic development and business sector. Because taxes and business and economic development and wetlands and conservation, and they all have to marry, and they all have to, we have to come to an agreement on what's going to work for the town for now and for 10, 20, 30 years from now.
Right.
So end with that.
Yeah, so that's a complicated one. That's one that every community is struggling with. So you get this push and pull
Yep.
between growth
Yeah.
and conservation.
Sure.
Right? So we have a task force that's going to be convened. We're working with Stephen Cole over Economic Development, Lee Hartman over in Planning,
Yep.
and a number of our board members to really think about, first, let's reuse the commercial industrial space that's already underutilized. So let's use that first before we start thinking about expanding,
Yep.
and get a better sense of like how can we encourage new businesses to become rooted here in the town.
Right.
So that's going to be a multi-year process as
Yep.
well, because the whole goal in that is not only expand economic development, but by doing so, it'll help mitigate rising residential taxes.
Exactly.
On our
Eventually.
tax base.
Yep. Eventually. Okay. And then finally, in our last minute or so, improving town infrastructure and protecting the environment. Infrastructure, that's always something that comes up, and sometimes you have no control over what happens in your infrastructure.
Yeah, I would say the big one here really is focused on water.
Yeah.
Right. So water is a major driver of everything we do. Even we're just talking about economic development. If we don't have water, we can't work
nothing.
with certain
Yep.
businesses. So. I can tell you that some of our board members are really focused on finding additional water sources. So,
Yep.
We talked, the DPW director said we need another additional well. Some would say we need 2 or 3 more wells.
Right.
So we will spend the next, I would say, 2 to 5 years identifying them, even if we don't need them right away,
Right.
identify them, put restrictions around them so they can't be developed,
Right.
protecting the aquifer. So in generations to come, we
Right.
have plenty of water.
Right.
Even some would say we could potentially even sell water to our neighbors if we do this the right way.
Yeah, and wouldn't that be nice?
Yep.
And finally, strengthening the town's workforce, to creating efficient town government, all those things. Everything in here, people should really read this because it's all subjects that come up around the dinner table every night for residents.
Yeah, I said, and I'm serious, that I could spend the next 2 years just making government more efficient.
Yeah.
Like if we did nothing, no economic development, nothing else,
Yep.
just focusing on our processes and communicating with the public just to make the things that we do more efficient, easily 2 years worth of work.
Oh yeah, but you save a lot of money and get a lot more out of what you do spend.
And you hope you get happy residents in return
Right.
because they understand the value of the work that you're doing.
That's right.
You're responsive, you're accountable,
Yep.
you're doing the things that they need you to do.
That's right. And I strongly suggest that people watch the select board meetings because so much is covered in those meetings. And this is a wonderful, and we'll put it up for you to see. It's a wonderful document for you to look through and see what your town leaders are actually working on for the future.
Yeah, no, and I'm excited about this, and I can tell you I'll end with, this is just the beginning.
Yep.
The hope is in the next 12 months, we're going to start the process to develop a 5-year strategic plan.
Great.
So this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay, wonderful. Derek, as always, you've been a plethora of information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
We'll
for
see you
having me.
next week.
Appreciate it.
Okay.